Lost City, the hunt for the ancient treasure. The rain pounded relentlessly on the canopy above, a steady drumbeat that echoed through the thick jungle. Steam rose from the forest floor, casting an eerie mist over the moss-covered stones and twisted roots. Somewhere in the distance, a jaguar growled low and deep. The air smelled of earth, sweat, and danger. Claire adjusted her backpack and wiped the sweat from her brow. Her boots sank into the mud with each step, and vines clawed at her legs like the forest itself was trying to keep her out. She glanced over her shoulder at Edward, who followed close behind, machete in hand. "You sure this is the right path?" she asked, pushing a branch aside. Edward checked the ancient map he held tightly in his left hand, a faded piece of parchment, stained and torn, yet more valuable than gold. If the old manuscripts are correct, the entrance should be just beyond the ridge. Claire smirked. "You said that 3 hours ago." "And I was almost right," Edward replied, flashing a grin. "Besides, we've come too far to turn back now." They were deep in the Peruvian rainforest, far beyond the reach of any satellite phone or rescue team. The locals whispered of an ancient city swallowed by the jungle, Xal'Atar, a city of untold riches and dark secrets, lost for over 1,000 years. Few believed it existed. Fewer still dared to look for it. But Claire and Edward weren't like most people. They were treasure hunters, explorers, survivors. Suddenly, the ground beneath Claire's foot gave way, and she slipped, sliding down a slope thick with mud and leaves. Edward lunged forward, grabbing her hand just in time to pull her back to solid ground. "Careful," he said, breathing hard. "This place doesn't want us here." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. No kidding. They pushed forward, deeper into the green abyss. Hours passed, maybe days. It was impossible to tell. The jungle seemed alive, watching, waiting. Then, just as the sun dipped below the trees, casting long golden shadows across the forest, they saw it. A massive stone archway covered in vines, half buried in the earth. Edward's eyes lit up. "We found it." Claire stepped closer, running her fingers along the carved symbols etched into the stone. "This writing, it's older than anything I've seen." With effort, they cleared the entrance and stepped inside. The air grew cold, stale. Torches flickered to life as Edward lit them one by one. The corridor stretched ahead, lined with murals depicting ancient warriors, gods, and what looked like a temple. They followed the path until it opened into a vast chamber. Columns rose like giants from the ground, and in the center stood a pedestal, upon which lay a golden idol shaped like a jaguar. Claire approached slowly. This must be it. But the moment she touched it, the ground rumbled. Stone doors slammed shut behind them. The walls began to shift. "It's a trap," Edward yelled. "Run!" They sprinted as the chamber collapsed around them. Arrows shot from hidden holes. Blades sliced through the air. They ducked, leaped, and dodged death at every turn. Just when they thought they were finished, Claire spotted a narrow tunnel. "This way." They barely made it through before the entire chamber caved in. Gasping for breath, covered in dust and bruises, they found themselves in a cavern unlike any other. The ceiling glowed with crystals. Underground rivers flowed silently, and at the far end of the cavern a temple, untouched by time. It was then they realized, this wasn't just about treasure. It was about something much bigger. Within the temple, they found not gold or jewels, but scrolls. Knowledge. Warnings of a great power sealed beneath the city. A weapon from a forgotten age. "We weren't the first to find this," Edward whispered, reading the scrolls. "Others came before us, and never left." Claire's eyes narrowed. "We have to stop this from falling into the wrong hands." Suddenly, a voice echoed behind them. "I couldn't agree more." They spun around. From the shadows emerged a man in black combat gear, flanked by armed mercenaries. His face was scarred, his eyes cold. "Doctor." "Marcus Vayne," Edward muttered. "I should have known you were behind this." Marcus smiled cruelly. "You did all the hard work. I'll take it from here." Guns were raised. Claire and Edward were surrounded. But they weren't about to go down without a fight. With lightning reflexes, Claire threw a flare into the nearest guard's face. Edward tackled another, and chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, fists and fury. They fought tooth and nail, using the temple's pillars and shadows for cover. In the end, Marcus escaped barely. But not with the scrolls. Claire and Edward did. As they emerged from the jungle days later, exhausted but alive, the idol safely tucked in Edward's pack and the scrolls sealed in Claire's waterproof case, they knew the adventure wasn't over. It was just beginning. The world would want to know what they found. But some secrets were better left buried. To be continued.
Frozen cage. The icy wind howled like a beast over the endless white wasteland. Emma adjusted her goggles, narrowing her eyes against the blinding glare of the sun reflecting off the snow. Their expedition had been in the Arctic for weeks, searching for something groundbreaking, something that would change the way humanity understood this frozen abyss. But what they found was far beyond anything they had ever imagined. Ronald, standing beside her, exhaled, his breath turning to mist in the frigid air. "I don't like this," he muttered. "That distress signal, it came from a station that was abandoned over 20 years ago. How is that possible?" Emma checked her tablet, the signal still blinking red on the screen. "We'll find out soon enough. We're close." Their snowmobiles hummed as they moved toward the coordinates, cutting through the desolate landscape. The others in their team, 5 researchers and 2 armed security personnel, followed behind. They had no idea that they were heading straight into a nightmare. As they approached the research station, a towering metal structure buried beneath ice and snow, an uneasy silence fell over the group. The place was eerily intact despite the decades that had passed. No sign of collapse, no damage, just an unnatural stillness. "Emma, stay close," Ronald said, gripping his rifle. "Something's wrong." Emma stepped forward and placed her gloved hand on the door. It wasn't frozen shut. In fact, it was slightly ajar. The group exchanged nervous glances before Emma pushed it open. The interior was dark, the power long since dead. Their flashlights illuminated the frost-covered walls and the overturned furniture. The station had been abandoned in a hurry, papers and lab equipment scattered across the floor, as if the people here had run for their lives. A flickering monitor in the corner of the room caught Emma's attention. She approached it cautiously and wiped away the frost covering the screen. The emergency power must have been running on some kind of backup battery. A log file was open, the last entry dated 20 years ago. "We made a mistake. We should never have opened it. If anyone finds this, run. Don't let it out." Emma's pulse quickened. "Ronald, you need to see this." Before he could respond, a sound echoed through the hallway, a deep guttural growl, something not human. They spun around just as a shadow darted past the open doorway. Ronald raised his rifle. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the sound of heavy breathing. Emma swallowed hard. It could be a bear. But even as she said it, she knew that wasn't true. No bear had glowing yellow eyes that pierced the darkness. The creature lunged. A blur of speed and muscle, it crashed into one of the security personnel, its claws slicing through his thick jacket like paper. A gurgling scream filled the room before his body was tossed aside like a rag doll, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. "Open fire!" Ronald shouted. Gunfire erupted, the flashes of light illuminating the horror before them. It was massive, standing at least 8 feet tall, its body a grotesque fusion of flesh and ice. The bullets barely slowed it down. It moved too fast, weaving through the chaos, its claws slashing through another team member's throat. "Run!" Emma screamed. They scattered, desperate to escape the slaughter. Emma and Ronald sprinted down a narrow corridor, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature's roar shook the walls, a primal, bone-chilling sound that made every instinct scream to flee. "What the hell is that thing?" Emma gasped. Ronald checked his rifle, half his ammo gone already. Something that shouldn't exist. They reached a locked steel door. Emma fumbled with the keypad, her fingers trembling. Come on. The beast crashed into the hallway behind them. It moved on all fours, its elongated limbs and jagged teeth gleaming under the emergency lights. The keypad blinked green. The door slid open. They dove inside, slamming the door behind them just as the creature rammed against it. Bang! 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 The metal dented inward with each monstrous impact. Emma turned, her flashlight scanning the room. It was a laboratory, but unlike the chaos outside, this place was untouched. Glass containers lined the walls, filled with an eerie blue liquid. In the center of the room, a massive glass pod stood upright. Something was inside it. Emma approached cautiously. The glass was cracked, frost covering the surface. She wiped it clean with her sleeve. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside was a humanoid figure, its body frozen in a thick layer of ice. But it wasn't dead. Its eyes snapped open. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. Frost spread across the walls and floor, creeping toward them. Ronald grabbed Emma's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now!" The frozen figure inside the pod moved, ice cracking as it lifted a hand. The glass exploded outward, sending shards flying. A voice echoed in their minds, not from the creature, but from deep within their own consciousness. "You should have never come here." Then the power went out, and the screaming began. The darkness swallowed them whole. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The laboratory, once dimly lit by the emergency power, was now submerged in pitch blackness. The only sound was the distant howling of the wind outside and the slow, ominous cracking of ice creeping along the walls. "Emma," Ronald's voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" "I'm here," she managed to say, gripping his arm in the darkness. What the hell was that thing? A deep, guttural sound resonated from where the containment pod had shattered, a noise that didn't belong in this world. Emma fumbled for her flashlight, hands shaking. The moment she switched it on, the beam cut through the darkness, revealing the figure that had been trapped inside. It was humanoid, but not human. Its body was encased in jagged ice, sharp crystalline formations protruding from its shoulders and arms. Its skin, if it could even be called that, was a deathly pale blue, pulsing with an eerie glow beneath the surface. Its eyes, twin orbs of liquid gold, locked onto Emma with a gaze so intense it made her blood run cold. And then it moved. Ronald reacted first, raising his rifle and firing. The bullets ricocheted off the creature's ice-covered body, embedding themselves uselessly in the walls. The thing didn't even flinch. Emma grabbed Ronald's arm. "We need to run, now." The creature took a step forward. The ice on its body crackled and shifted, responding to its movements as if it were alive. Then, without warning, the temperature plummeted. The breath in Emma's lungs turned to mist. The very air froze. Ice formed on her eyelashes, her clothes stiffening as the moisture around them crystallized. She heard a crack behind her. She spun around in horror. One of the scientists, still standing near the door, had been completely frozen in place. His body was covered in a thin layer of frost, his eyes wide and unblinking. A second later, his frozen body shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emma didn't have time to scream. Ronald grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the emergency exit. "Go!" They sprinted through the darkened hallway, their breath coming in panicked gasps. The creature's presence was everywhere. The very walls seemed to ice over as it moved, frost crawling across the floor like a living thing. Then came the roar. A sound so inhuman, so otherworldly, it shook the very air around them. Emma turned just in time to see the creature lunge. Ronald shoved her aside at the last second. The beast crashed into him, sending them both flying through a glass window and into the snow outside. "Ronald!" Emma screamed. She scrambled after them, ignoring the searing cold against her skin. Outside, the blizzard raged. Snow and ice whipped across her vision as she searched frantically for Ronald. Then, through the storm, she saw them, Ronald and the creature, locked in a brutal struggle. The thing's clawed hand was wrapped around Ronald's throat, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. Ronald struggled, gasping for air, his hands clawing at the ice-covered grip that threatened to crush his windpipe. Emma acted on instinct. She reached for the emergency flare gun strapped to her belt. With shaking hands, she aimed at the creature's head and pulled the trigger. A bright red explosion of fire and heat burst through the storm, slamming into the monster's face. The reaction was instant. The creature screeched. A sound so piercing, Emma felt it in her bones. It dropped Ronald, clutching its face as the fire spread across its icy skin, melting the frost away in rapid bursts of steam. Ronald collapsed into the snow, coughing violently. Emma ran to his side, grabbing him by the arm. "Come on, we have to go!" The creature was writhing, thrashing, its once perfect icy form beginning to melt. But then, something worse happened. As the ice melted, it revealed something beneath. Something alive. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The creature wasn't just made of ice. The ice was a prison. And now they had set it free. The air changed. The storm suddenly stopped. The howling wind ceased. The snowflakes, frozen mid-air, hung suspended as if time itself had paused. And then, a voice, deep, ancient and resonating inside their minds rather than their ears. Fools. Emma's hands clenched into fists. The creature straightened, the last remnants of ice falling away from its body. What stood before them now was something else entirely. It was humanoid, but its skin was blackened like charred obsidian. Its golden eyes burned brighter, filled with intelligence. And something else. Hunger. Ronald pulled Emma back. We need to leave, now. But they didn't get the chance. With inhuman speed, the creature vanished and reappeared right in front of them. Before Emma could react, its hand shot forward, grabbing her by the throat. She gasped as an unbearable cold flooded through her body. Images flashed before her eyes, memories that weren't hers. She saw a team of scientists from 20 years ago. She saw their desperation, their fear. She saw them accidentally awakening something they couldn't control. She saw them trying to contain it, freezing it in ice as their last hope to prevent disaster. And now she saw their mistake repeating. Emma choked, her vision darkening. Then, a gunshot. Ronald had fired point blank at the creature's head. It barely flinched, but it was enough. The grip on Emma's throat loosened just for a second. She gasped, breaking free, collapsing into the snow. Ronald grabbed her. Run! Run! They bolted, tearing through the snow, through the storm that had resumed with a vengeance. The facility loomed ahead of them, but there was no time. Behind them, the creature's laughter echoed through the storm. You cannot escape the cold. Then the world went white. The last thing Emma heard was the roar of an avalanche, coming straight for them. And then, nothing. To be continued.